Trump just signed an executive order to give refugee status to white people. You can't make this shit up. He signed an executive order today. It's on whitehouse.gov. And it's about South Africa. That's weird.
There it is. Donald Trump has signed an executive order cutting off all funding to South Africa.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we are diving into a significant development in international relations. President Donald Trump has recently signed an executive order that has major implications for South Africa and US foreign aid. Let's break down what is happening and how people are reacting.
I mentioned last week the South African government had been accused of driving a group of illegal miners to cannibalism. And I was delighted to say that no sooner had that gone online than up popped Donald Trump, who clearly agrees with me that there's something very, very rotten in the state of South Africa.
Why South Africa? It's only South Africa. Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things.
So what is Donald Trump referring to? Here's a South African farmer pleading with Trump for help.
Hundreds of thousands of people being the victims of serious crime each year. Thousands of our people and children are being murdered and raped on a daily basis. I'm a boer and farmer, and since the ANC came into power, thousands of white farmers were murdered and tortured to death on farms.
Well, only today, Donald Trump's new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, announced, quote, that I will not attend the G20 summit in Johannesburg. South Africa is doing very bad things, expropriating private property, end of quote. In that, he is referring to white farms being seized. Marco Rubio goes on, accusing South Africa of, quote, using the G20 to promote solidarity, equality and sustainability. In other words, DEI and climate change. Add to the list the fact that last year South Africa set the International Criminal Court onto Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister. It was not a smart move. The Trump administration has now turned the tables and is looking to sanction the International Criminal Court members themselves. But above all, there have been for a long time accusations and fears about the level of anti-white rhetoric that comes out of South Africa.
For each one person that is being killed by the taxi industry, we get 5 white people. For every one black person you get 5 white people.
Unbelievable. And here's the abhorrent Julius Malema at a rally of thousands of South Africans chanting, kill the farmer, kill the boer. So yes, South Africa is rightly on Donald Trump's radar, and none too soon. Donald Trump's to-do list is getting longer by the day, but what is clear, especially from his Gaza plans, which I wholeheartedly support, is that the old world order of these massive globalist bodies like the United Nations and all its affiliates, the World Health Organization, the World Bank, World Economic Forum, and so on, that whole world is teetering on the brink of collapse. And the sooner Trump gives it the final push over the edge of the cliff, the better. You see, for 8 decades since the Second World War, the West has embarked on a process of reverse colonialism. We set up all these grandiose organizations, and we pay for them, to spread Western values of peace and prosperity to the rest of the world, at the same time as handing back sovereignty to a string of third world nations that had previously benefited from Western institutions. And guess what? We've imported millions of people from sometimes very alien and different cultures into our lives and into our worlds, at the same time as handing over the reins of all those global institutions to countries who in many cases simply hate the West. Which is why the streets of many modern Western cities, including some of our own, now resemble third world hellholes where civility and law-abiding citizens tread fearfully. And which is why institutions like the United Nations are riddled with anti-Semitism, anti-white racism, cronyism and corruption. and which is why outfits like the World Health Organization, certainly during COVID, were, in my opinion, little more than fronts for the Chinese Communist Party and for medical totalitarianism, and which is why debt is out of control across the West, because we have been busy financing our own destruction to the tune of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that pour out of Western governments into a vast range of dubious overseas programs under the name of foreign aid. When Donald Trump came to power, he promised to root out waste and inefficiency within the US government. Well, he didn't have to look far, did he? Already after only 2 weeks, the Trump administration has unearthed a stinking, putrid mess of woke political and financial corruption almost impossible to imagine. In America, much foreign aid is funneled through a department called USAID, or the United States Agency for International Development, a benevolent-sounding Washington bureau which runs a $40 billion annual budget. But who decides where the money goes? President Donald Trump didn't mince his words.
Radical lunatics, and we're getting them out. USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision.
Trump just signed an executive order to give refugee status to white people. You can't make this shit up. He signed an executive order today. It's on whitehouse.gov. And it's about South Africa. That's weird. Here's the executive order. He basically says that the government of South Africa is illegally taking land and property from the ethnic minority in South Africa. In case you don't know who that is, he's talking about white people. Now, in his executive order, he talks about how the government of South Africa is dismantling programs that are aimed to create equal opportunity in employment and education and business. Yeah, I couldn't imagine a government that would dismantle programs that would take away the equal opportunity of employment, education, and business. But Donald Trump is very upset that South Africa is doing this, and he signed an executive order giving refugee status to any ethnic minority Afrikaner who the government's taking their shit away, which specifically is happening to white people. Now, there's some very, very important shit to talk about here. The guy who ran his entire campaign on fuck refugees just signed an executive order to make white people refugees. Number two, how does Donald Trump know what's happening in South Africa? In fact, why is America First Donald Trump so concerned about what's happening in South Africa? Oh, I gotta guess the real president is concerned about it. That's why. But thirdly, and most importantly, he literally talks about in this executive order how it is egregious that they are dismantling these programs to create equal opportunity in employment, education, and business, which is the same fucking thing he's doing here. So what does that mean? That means that Donald Trump understands that diversity, equity, and inclusion in America is necessary because of white supremacy, but he don't give a fuck. He also understands that white people in South Africa stole and hoarded resources during apartheid, and the government simply taking stolen shit back, but he don't like that because white supremacy. So this should tell you two things definitively. Number one, President Musk is in charge. And number two, during the campaign when he was talking about immigrants, clearly, as we all said he was only talking about non-white immigrants.
There it is. Donald Trump has signed an executive order cutting off all funding to South Africa and promoting a resettlement of Afrikaner refugees, prioritizing humanitarian relief, including admission and resettlement through the United States Refugee Admissions Program for Afrikaners in South Africa. Quick one, are they going to help these Afrikaner refugees take their wine farms, other farms, vast tracts of land, game reserves, houses in the suburbs, and in some cases, multi-million rand to multi-billion rand businesses with them? Because that's the thing, right? Obviously, many Afrikaners are not wealthy, although quite a few are. But nearly all Afrikaners are better off and have a better quality of life than most South Africans. And many Afrikaners would have a worse quality of life were they to move to America than they have here. I'm presuming that the US is not going to take their domestic workers with them. It's honestly hilarious in its fact-free stupidity, because if it is race-based discrimination, then why is it only Afrikaners? Am I not eligible as a poor downtrodden refugee? My heart bleeds. It's obviously also revolting because, as we know, refugees are people who have had to genuinely flee for their lives because their lives and their possibility of life in their home places has been destroyed by a war from genuinely violent, life-threatening persecution. Whereas white South Africans, Afrikaans and English have benefited, been blessed by hundreds of years of economic engineering premised on the vile exploitation of people of color. And since the end of apartheid, have been allowed to keep all of the fruits of those unjust blessings, which is why the vast majority of white South Africans, Afrikaners included, have not fled the country. You know, the way refugees do. And it is also just deeply racist because the United States of America has cancelled or frozen any processes for asylum seekers from countries involving people of color. And yet they're making a special exemption for Afrikaners from South Africa. Those are the only people they will give refugee status to.
My name is Davy Wessels. President Trump, I see a lot of liberals wants to tell you what's going on in South Africa. Well, on ground level, our situation is dismal. And yes, you are correct in your assumption that South Africa is a failed state. We are experiencing a war-like situation with more than 22,000 people being murdered each year, hundreds of thousands of people being affected by crime each year. Thousands of our people and children are being murdered and raped on a daily basis. I'm a boer and farmer, and since the ANC came into power, thousands of white farmers were murdered and tortured to death on their farms. This being actively encouraged by the EFF and ANC. People are dying in state hospitals, always, waiting for days to be admitted for standard procedures. All the while, the ANC cadre steals the money, which is supposed to go to the needy. All state institutions are failing, and the woke liberal DA are the ones signing the expropriation law into power, since they are part of the ANC-led government. The situation is so bad currently that if a loved one doesn't answer their phone, you're immediately worried about what could have happened to them. The woke liberals and the ANC is trying to paint a rosy picture. But if you want our help in your investigation, we will show you the reality on ground level. We already gathered 50,000 signatures in 2 days in support of this message of us. And it is to be handed over in a huge gathering by our fellow Boers and Patriots Saturday the 15th at the US Embassy in Pretoria. This gathering is organized by myself and fellow Afrikaner Willem Petzer. We sincerely hope this message will reach you, and we want to thank the international community for their continued support.
Breaking news, South Africa is in panic after President Donald Trump vowed to cut all future funding from the country over human rights violations and mistreating a certain class of people, in this case, white farmers. And just to give you an idea, the United States provided them $440 million in 2023. But what exactly are these violations? For decades, if the government wanted to have your land, they would offer you some money for your property, and then you would choose if you want to sell it to them or not. However, all of that has now changed after the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, has signed a new bill into law that would allow the government to seize your land by force in the name of the greater good and equity. In this case, most of the farmland is owned by white people, and a large population is jealous and hates the fact that that's the case, which is very reminiscent to what happened in Zimbabwe. Now the president has come forward and responded saying, no, not true, fake, liar, propaganda, only to get community noted. Well. Join me on Discord to talk about it.
Breaking news, as the demented narky known as Donald Trump has officially signed an executive order which has sanctioned South Africa. Well, kind of. Let me explain. Now, the Mongo cosplaying as a head of state, Donald Trump, signed an executive order today which is specifically directed at South Africans. And it will do 2 things. Firstly, all aid and assistance towards South Africa from the USA is officially cut. So things such as Usaid will be cut until further notice. And then secondly, the United States of America will be helping Afrikaners resettle in America as they are quote-unquote victims of racist laws in South Africa. You heard that right. The benefactors of apartheid are now refugees in the United States of America. You can't make this shit up. Anyways, the executive order has given reasons for all of this, stating that 1, apparently we treat Afrikaners bad. 2, we decided to stand up for human rights in the ICJ case. 3, we're starting to become baddies with Iran. And just in general, we're snacks towards the USA. So that's the reason why we're here. But this has been Mashing Up Potatoes here from Pretoria.
Okay, listen, speaking as a South African, I think I can speak for a lot of us, maybe all of us, when I say, please don't send Elon Musk back. Like, also, please don't judge us by him. Like, we all have that, like, really weird, kind of messed up member of the family. You know what I mean? Every family's got that one nephew, you know, or that, like, dodgy uncle that comes to dinner, you know, and always, like, lingers a little too long on the hello kiss. Do you know what I'm saying? We all have that one dodgy member of the family. Elon Musk is South Africa's dodgy member of the family. He's like the uncle that you really don't want to invite to Christmas, but you kind of have to. Please keep him. America, you can keep him. Or you can send him somewhere else, but like we don't really want him back here. Thank you. Thanks so much. Mzansi says hi.
President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to cut financial assistance to South Africa. He cited his disapproval of the country's land policy, as well as the genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. The White House says it will formulate a plan to resettle white South African farmers and their families as refugees. Last week, Trump made unsubstantiated claims that South Africa is confiscating land, adding that certain classes of people were being treated very badly. His close ally, South African-born billionaire Elon Musk, has shared Trump's sentiments, saying white South Africans have been the victims of racist ownership laws. The most recent U.S. government data shows that the United States allocated nearly $440 million in assistance to South Africa in 2023.
One of the reasons why Donald Trump is now lashing out at South Africa over untrue claims of land grabs is because of AfriForum, a lobby group that has been working tirelessly for years to try and convince world leaders that there are land grabs in South Africa and white people are under threat and under attack. AfriForum has also twisted reality to try and make it look like there is an above average rate of farm murders in South Africa, which has been exhaustively, thoroughly, repeatedly debunked by researchers and journalists from around the world at this point. But that didn't stop them from getting on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News back in 2018 when it was like the most watched political show in America and spewing this nonsense. Soon after that, Tucker did a piece on land grabs and expropriation in South Africa. And soon after that, Donald Trump tweeted about the awful things going on in South Africa for the first time. And all of that and years more of AfriForum campaigning has led to this moment. There have been no land grabs in South Africa since 1994. Because before 1994, land grabs and unjust expropriation was kind of apartheid's whole thing. And before that, the English South African-led government's whole thing. See the 1913 Land Act. And before that, colonialism's whole thing. But this little thing called reality has not stopped AfriForum from spreading their nonsense. And they were thrilled yesterday morning when Trump lashed out at South Africa and threatened cuts. Until they realized that Trump could cut back on things that really mattered to AfriForum supporters, white farmers, like the AGOA deal that helps our agriculture sector so much. And by yesterday evening, a lobby group from South Africa was calling for a foreign government to sanction our democratically elected leaders based on lies, nonsense, evils that they accuse our government of doing that our government has not been doing. That's where we are.
You see this, man. I know a lot of people will be like, but oh my God, like what are people going to... Guys, this is a good thing for the world. This is a good thing for Africa. This is a good thing that the world officially cut ties with America. You know, this thing that they believe that everybody needs them. It's officially coming to an end. Literally, America and Donald Trump and Elon Musk are basically destroying the country. Like, they're basically destroying that country. And they're actually giving us our liberation, guys. So, this is a win. Don't be sad. This is literally a win, guys. Shout out to us. And it's going to be bad for America, guys. It's going to be bad.
All right, so Donald Trump, the president of the United States, dropped a bomb on South Africa this morning. I'm sure that you all have seen the post by now. And it's very sad that it has taken the president of another country to show the obvious discrimination happening in South Africa. The GNU government has absolutely failed to talk about the fact that we have policies in place in 2025 that discriminate against people based on the color of their skin. It's almost as if we learned nothing from apartheid. There are more race laws now in South Africa than at the height of apartheid. Now, apartheid was terrible, terrible things happened, but it doesn't change the fact that there are policies in 2025 that is very apartheid-esque with regards to limiting what people can and cannot do based on the color of their skin. And then, of course, EWC, many people warned the ANC government, many people warned the GNU, and yet they still continued implementing it. And that is why now 8.4 billion rand is being withheld from South Africa, from the United States that would be funding aid in South Africa. And this is just the start. As you can see, Donald Trump said that they are going to investigate this and look deeper, and sanctions might be on the cards, and then that will lead to trillions of rands being wiped off of the table that South Africa could benefit from a US trade relationship. Besides that, the obvious elephant in the room here is the fact that the ANC has already responded saying, well, we live in a constitutional democracy and EWC is in accordance with that, which is utter bullshit. We know that it's not. We know that it is an opportunity for cadres to eat and not to really improve South Africa for all who lives in it. So hopefully somebody wakes up and realizes that, hey, maybe a child born in 2007, 13 years after we became a democracy, didn't have anything to do with apartheid and should not be discriminated against when he turns 18 in 2025. And he should be able to benefit, as anybody else with a job opportunity, and not be discriminated against based on his race. The last thing that I want to say on this is that it is quite sickening and sad that the obvious answer here is that we need policies that assist people based on their economic standing and not based on the color of their skin. The fact that the GNU has not realized this in 2025, 31 years after the end of apartheid, is problematic. The fact of the matter is, there is no room in South Africa for race-based policies anymore, especially considering our history and how we know how detrimental race-based policies are in South Africa. Just a simple answer is base it on merit, base it on economic standing, and then you will get the majority of people that will benefit from this will be black people, but you will not skip poor, white, colored, and Indian people just because you assume that every white, colored, and Indian person is well off in South Africa.
Can I just say, my black South Africans, I understand the jokes about the lips now. Last night in the sauna, I saw the white people. So I am extremely happy for the 2 or 3% African blood I have in me for this. I thank my ancestors for mixing a little bit to give me some lips. But yes, okay, so let's get to the bill. The expropriation with nil compensation clause is mostly for abandoned land or unaided land. So during the height of land claims, right, a lot of people just took the money and they never worked the land. They never did anything with the land. So what's going to happen is the government is going to expropriate that land, verify it with the courts that that land needs no compensation or nil compensation, right? And then the courts will say, okay, sure. Then that land will be redistributed again to the people, but this time you will have to verify of what your purpose is with the land. Now, before it gets misconstrued or anything like that, I am for land expropriation without compensation. And this is because I know exactly who makes the money. It is not the everyday person that makes the money. It's mostly family members of the ANC peoples, right? The high ups are in the ANC. And the general person, everyday person in our country don't benefit from that, right? So And then on top of that, the land that's now empty and vacant, they can't go work on that land or do anything with that land because it's been land claimed. So the government has to re-expropriate that so that they can redistribute it. Then when it comes to the question of commercialized land, right, you will see that AfriForum and AfGri always fight against no compensation, and that's because of their bosses. Their bosses are the mega farmers. Mega farmers export 90% of their produce out of our country and leave a measly 10% for 60 million people to live on. So we are very dependent in this country on small holding farmers to give us sustenance, food, right? And this is all ethnic groups, not just one. There is no market available for our small holding farmers. So our small holding farmers are very dependent on local, local markets surrounding them. That's why we have farmers markets. For you guys in the cities and in Western Cape, I don't know if you have farmers markets. Here in Mpumalanga, we've got farmers markets and Limpopo, where we support the local farmers. So you buy something from a local farmer instead of going to buy in a big shop, right? So that they can put some food on their tables, because our food security in this country is in jeopardy. So I know Cyril spoke a lot of crap last night, and I'll be talking about that later on today as well. But until the next video, enjoy. Also, if you made it to the end of this one, thank you.
Alright, the recent executive order signed by President Donald Trump cutting financial assistance to South Africa and shutting down USAID mission overseas is causing major controversy both in the US and globally. This decision, officially titled Presidential Action Address Aggregation Action of the Republic of South African Executive Order, was framed by the administration as a response to South African land expropriation policy, which Trump and his supporters argue discriminates against the white minority, specifically Afrikaner farmers. First, let's talk about what this means practically. The United States provides millions of dollars in aid to South Africa annually, funding programs in public health, education, and economic development. USAID, which has been active in South Africa since the end of apartheid, plays a key role in initiatives such as HIV to AIDS treatment, poverty reduction, and small business support. By shutting down USAID mission overseas and cutting financial support, Trump is signaling a clear shift in U.S. foreign policy, moving away from what he and his supporters see as wasting taxpayer dollars on countries that, in their view, do not align with American values. But the reality is more complex. South Africa, despite being one of the African largest economies, faces extreme inequality, high unemployment, and public health crises that USAID programs have been addressing for years. Cutting aid could have serious consequences, especially for vulnerable populations who rely on these programs. Trump's decision isn't happening in a vacuum. His justification hints on South Africa's expropriation bill, which allows the government to take land without compensation under certain conditions. This is meant to address historical inequalities from apartheid, when black South Africans were forcibly removed from their land. However, Trump and his allies argue that this is a form of racial discrimination against white South Africans, particularly Afrikaner farmers. Elon Musk, who was born in South Africa, has been one of the most vocal figures supporting Trump's stance. Musk has repeatedly tweeted that white farmers in South Africa are being targeted, calling it a human rights issue. Conservative media in the US have picked up on this, framing the land reform policy as a violation of property rights and an attack on free market principles. But let's be clear, South African government insists that land expropriation is necessary to correct centuries and racial inequality. President Cyril Ramaphosa and his administration argue that black South Africans, who make up over 80% of the population, own less than 10% of the private land due to historical policy. The government says this redistribution is needed for economic justice, not racial revenge. Now let's talk about how people are reacting. Predictably, Trump supporters are praising the move. On conservative social media platforms and news outlets, many are saying this is a Trump standing up for Western civilization and stopping US money from going to a country that, in their view, is engaging in racist policy. Right-wing commentators are comparing South African land reforms to Zimbabwe's, pointing to economic decline and instability that followed the land seizure there. On the other hand, critics are slamming Trump for interfering in South Africans' domestic affairs. Many argue that cutting edge hurts ordinary South Africans, not just the government. South African officials have responded with outrage, calling the move neocolonialism and an attack on their sovereignty. They accuse Trump of trying to indicate their internal policy from Washington, D.C. They are also concerned about how the decision affects U.S.-African relations more broadly. South Africa is a key player on the African continent, and these moves could push them closer to China and Russia, who have been increasing their influence in Africa. If South Africa turns to Beijing or Moscow for support, it could weaken U.S. diplomatic and economic ties in the region. Beyond South Africa, the executive order instructs all USAID missions overseas to shut down by Friday. This is a massive policy shift. USAID operates in over 100 countries, providing humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, and development aid. Trump's move to shut it down aligns with his long-standing belief that the US focus inward and stop funding programs abroad. This has sparked a major backlash from human rights organizations and foreign policy experts. Critics argue that the USAID has played a crucial role in stabilizing regions affected by conflicts, poverty, and disease. If missions shut down, it could create power vacuums in vulnerable countries, allowing terrorist groups, authoritarian regimes, and rival nations to step in. For instance, in Africa, USAID has been crucial in the fight against HIV/AIDS, malaria, and food insecurity. Cutting these programs could lead to public health crises and economic downturns, ultimately creating more instability in regions already struggling. Finally, let's talk about Trump's post on X about South Africa. In his usual blunt style, he posted, "We will not support any country that embraces anti-white racism. South African policies are unacceptable. American first means we stop funding hate. Hashtag stop the genocide." This post has triggered intense debates. Trump is clearly doubling down on the narrative that South Africa is persecuting white people, a claim that is widely disputed. While farm attacks in South Africa are a real issue, crime in the country affects all racial groups and there is no solid evidence of a white genocide. This language, however, plays well with Trump's base. It taps into their fears of so-called anti-white policy and globalism. But it also fuels racial tension and spreads misinformation. Critics say that by using the term genocide, Trump is exaggerating and distorting the situation to push his political agenda. On the South Africa side, officials are furious. The government has strongly denied the accusation, calling Trump's post inflammatory and misleading. They argue that the land reform is necessary for justice and economic stability, not racial discrimination. The fallout from this executive order is just beginning. South Africa may retaliate by strengthening ties with other global powers, particularly China and Russia. The US Congress might also weigh in. Some lawmakers, even on the Republican side, are concerned about shutting down USAID completely. For South Africans, the aid cut could worsen economic and social challenges, especially in communities that rely on US funding programs. And for the broader international community, this raises serious questions about US foreign policy under Trump's leadership. One thing is certain, these moves have reignited debate about race, international aid, and American roles in the world. And with Trump running for re-election, it's likely we will see more of these headlines foreign policy decisions aimed at energizing his base. So where do we stand on this? Do you think Trump is right to cut aid and take a stand on South African policy? Or is this an unnecessary intervention that does more harm than good? Drop your thoughts in the comment and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for watching and let's continue this conversation in the comment below. Let us share our thoughts and perspective with one another. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the story and more. I will see you in the next video.